Please check out our sponsors NordVPN for the best in online security. It's the best VPN on the market, and you can try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee by visiting nordvpn.com/heartandhand. That's nordvpn.com/heartandhand, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host, and I'm delighted this week on the rotation that the man here can offer some insight into the current situation at Rangers, having lived it himself once. It's David Graham. Hello, Davey.
Davey, how are you? Afternoon listeners, evening listeners. Yeah, some will say I lived the dream. There's at times it felt a lot less like a dream, more like a nightmare. But certainly it never fell into the depths of where Russell Martin took us yesterday afternoon. So the only way is up.
Yeah, I'm pretty glad he wasn't there in your ring, because I think you might have ended up doing time. But yes, so Rangers have got rid of Russell Martin, officially the worst Rangers manager in history, David, including. I initially thought it was the worst Rangers manager in our permanent history, but no, he is the worst Rangers manager of all time. He has the lowest win percentage. I'll just give you some comparatory ones. His was 29%. And I'll give you some of the recent ones. Barry Ferguson, 53. Philippe Clement, 65. Michael Beale, 72. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, 59. Steven Gerrard, 64. Mark Warburton, 66. Stuart McCall, 41. Kenny McDowell, 30. He was worse than Kenny McDowell. Ali McCoy, 72. Walter Smith, 63. Paul Le Guen, 52. Can go even further back. John Gregg, 52. And that was a particularly successful period. Davy White, 64%. This guy was a disaster for Rangers, and I think Rangers have been a disaster for him because he leaves now with his credibility as a football manager completely and utterly shot. I've noticed this in the last few weeks. He's not simply been getting criticism or mocking from people within the Scottish game, which can be quite insular, Davy, but he is being roundly mocked down south as well, and across Europe. This guy has done a terrible, terrible job, and the strong suspicion is he's just not very good at football management.
No, well, look, I think he is officially the worst Rangers manager of all time for two reasons. The statistical reasons that you have just outlined, but also the fact it wasn't just the results, it was how we were getting to the results, but even more so than that, it was then his, dare I say, analysis of said results that I just think, as my old games master at school said, those of us that know a bit about the oval shaped ball, it has to go back and you have to run forward in rugby. And he basically said, don't shovel shit. And what he meant by that was one bad pass and another bad pass, you're just compounding your issues. And I think the difficulty was that Russell Martin had the very unique skill of both digging himself into a hole whilst digging himself into the hole whilst covering himself with shite. So overall, look, I was going to say I don't know where to start. That's why we're on this show. But the only thing I want to say at this stage is I'm not going to sit here and say, I told you so, Davey. And I don't think you're going to say the same back to me. And I think, in fairness, both of us from the early days here were very much, he's our manager now. So basically, let's support him because we support the team, because we support the club. But there's no doubt that he had the unique ability of almost uniting what is in many ways quite a fragmented support, even at the best of times, behind the fact that everyone wanted him out. Some people never wanted him in. In fact, probably the vast majority of people never wanted him in. And I think that the saddest indictment on him, as dare I say, as a person, was that he seemed to either have some sort of almost sociopathic ability to ignore how we felt, or he literally just did not care. But either way, he's the most toxic manager of all time. He's the most hated manager of all time. And I think for him, listen, he's a father, he's a son, he's all those things. He's a human being, but in reality, he's going to leave with a good payoff from Rangers. And I would be shocked if anyone is stupid enough to appoint him again in any position. But then again, we've seen similar levels of people get jobs high up in football. So alas, he's not our problem anymore.
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you because while I'm sure there will be some championship managers down south, or owners rather, who go, well, he did well at Southampton, I'll hire him. The backlash from the club support is going to be huge. Anywhere he goes now, this is the reaction he's going to get because he has become a joke figure. But it's his own doing. It is, as you say, his way of doing things, the way he speaks. He communicates, I think, poorly. He communicates in business speak, buzzwords. But he is also terrible for trying to tell you that what you watched wasn't what you just watched. And even yesterday in his press conference, David, I'm going to read you some of the stuff that he said yesterday during his press conference, and it covers everything that was wrong, and I think that was the issue for him. Here's what he said about the game, and I won't go through it in detail. But he said we spoke about battling and fighting. We had to do lots in that first 20 minutes, and we did defend the box, threw bodies in the way, and grew into the game. Scored a brilliant goal, and then start the second half all right because we don't get a second goal. A bit of tension comes in. We have to make a few changes for some energy and stuff. And I still felt comfortable. We didn't have enough moments at that point, but I didn't feel that they were going to score. Obviously, the goal comes out of nowhere. We don't compete properly on one side of the pitch. We don't make up for that as a group, and it flies in, which just seems to be the way it's going at the moment. Then after that, it's an open game. We're trying to get a winner, which has been the case too many times, and we have to put everything in so it leaves you a bit open, a bit exposed at times, and it just becomes frantic, really. That's counterproductive, actually. If they stay calm and play their position at that point, it probably gives us more of a chance. So we had some brilliant moments. We got in the box. It's just a little slide across the score, but we didn't make the final decision. And to me, this is everything encapsulated in that one answer. First of all, the fact that we started the second half okay. No, we didn't. Secondly, I felt comfortable. I didn't think they were going to score. You're the only one. And this isn't revisionism because I said it yesterday during the match on my social media. Our WhatsApp groups were all saying it. They were in total control, Falkirk, and looking like they were going to get a goal. And then at the end, he blames the players because they didn't do what they were told. It was never his fault. Things were always better than they looked. And he is a terrible communicator. And it's ironic because he's somebody who I'm sure considers himself a good communicator. He can speak to other people who speak that same buzzword bingo language. And it works to get them jobs because people in boardrooms tend to speak that. But communicating is not only about how you speak, it's about who you're speaking to and can you tailor it for that. And he couldn't.
Yeah, so I'm actually just slightly lost for words in that everything he said, I would quite comfortably contradict virtually every word because none of that happened, Russell. We, in my view, went into that game yesterday, Davy, and for the first at least 20 minutes, looked like a team who was playing away from home, having just been promoted from the league below, holding on for the skin of our teeth. We sort of grew into the game. Then, in reality, given our wage budget compared to Falkirk, we should have a bit of quality. And actually, it was a nice ball whipped across the box. Mielski scores great. But you still weren't going in. That's a huge relief because you think we're in control. Not once in the almost 100 minutes of play did I feel that yesterday. The fact that it was such a good long range goal from the boy Cartwright is almost a little bit of a disservice to Falkirk because they deserved to score many times. We didn't deserve to score at all, bar I suppose Majowski's goal. If anyone was going to score at the end, it was going to be Falkirk. And I actually think, and I'm not defending the players, but because I think there are things that we haven't been doing, haven't done at all, haven't done even well before Russell Martin's come in some cases, in terms of the basics of closing down and just trying to win second balls and showing a bit of fight. But I think Russell Martin created the toxic environment where, you know, no one expected us to score in the last minute yesterday, even though literally the week before we had done it away to Livingston. In fact, to be honest, most people probably didn't even care because they just wanted to ensure that he was, or just wanted to know he was going to be sacked last night. And all of that's on Russell Martin. He created this entire situation for himself. And look, we'll talk about it, Davey. And the last thing I'll say to you at this point is this narrative around, you know, I think Simon Jordan and Jim come out with it this morning, talk sport of, Rangers and expectation and entitlement and all these various things. Listen, there is not a football club support base in the world, with respect, whether you're Lords Athletic or you're Real Madrid, that will accept what Rangers fans were put through in the last 3 months. And if you do, you're not really a supporter. You're just someone that gets out of the house the weekend to get away from the wife.
Yeah, five wins in 17, right? And in those 17 games, there was not one time where I would say the team were great, where I was buzzing leaving it. They were good against Pilsen for most of the match. It was a great
Who were
result.
rotten, by the way, just as
Yeah,
just
who were not a great side, but it was a great result
yeah,
and a good
fair.
performance. Second half against Hibs at Ibrox, they were good. Didn't score in that half, it should be pointed out. So you can't say that they were great. And that's it. That really is it. The rest of the time, Rangers were disjointed, fragmented, confused looking. They looked as though they didn't know what they were trying to do. At the start of the season, they looked as though they were overcoached. And then at the end of it, by the end of his reign, they looked as though they were undercoached. He never found a medium where they actually looked as though they were coached, much as he bristled at that suggestion. Whatever it was he was trying to instill failed because the players either couldn't or wouldn't take it on board or didn't understand it, which I suspect is closer to the truth. And while I'm not going to blame, not going to shuck blame for the players, and trust me, folks will come to it, and they are going to get it later in this show. He had this, much vaunted philosophy. It would tend to go out the window, and it has been out the window for the last few weeks. And what you were left with was a journalist said this to me, an English journalist who's not in any way interested in the Old Firm particularly, so he doesn't have any skin in the game or an axe to grind. And he said, "See now that he has just moved to trying anything," he said, "what's the good of him? Because surely if you hire a guy because he does a certain thing, if he's not going to try to do that certain thing anymore, which he wasn't, then why bother with him? Because the reason for hiring him isn't there. If he's going to play a different way, surely you're better getting rid of him and getting a manager in who plays that way anyway." And there was a lot of truth in that. And I just felt with Russell Martin that it was a guy who realised very quickly he'd bitten off more than he could chew. I think that his appointment and his failure comes from an attitude that is inherent in a lot of people down south, Davey, which is it's only Scotland and it's the Old Firm, Rangers, or it's Celtic, but who cares about them right now? It's all about us. It comes from it's not that hard, right? Because you've got these advantages, and sure you've got to go and try and win a title, but and beat the other mob. But the rest of it takes care of itself. And everything I've seen from Patrick Stewart, deeply unimpressive man. Everything I've seen from Kevin Thelwell, really also an unimpressive man so far. And Russell Martin suggested to me that they came in and they kind of thought, right, we'll just do what we've done elsewhere. It'll be absolutely fine here because it's only Scotland. And then they were left looking at each other going, oh, what the hell is happening here? And to me, Martin did look like a guy who was just completely and utterly drowning, Loch Lomond metaphors aside. And I think if you look at the recruitment in the summer and the market that Thelwell targeted, I think if you look at the way that Patrick Stewart has, I think, almost evaporated under the glare of this, then I think it shows you that these guys just completely, and this maybe goes further up to the new owners as well, and probably does, they underestimated the size of the task, the scale of the job, and what was needed to be successful.
Yeah, well, I think David tried to, and look, let's not sit here and say that you or I or any of the listeners are perfect either and infallible, and ultimately, if any of us were put in all three of the shoes that we're going to discuss, we would certainly struggle with various aspects of what are hugely demanding roles. So we caveat that. What I would say is that if you look at the track record of all three, Manchester United are arguably the worst run football club and certainly in not even the top 5 leagues, but in probably in the top 25 leagues in world football right in the last 10 years. Aren't particularly far behind. And I know that
Fair.
you as an Evertonian, you can say that. So it's not as if these guys are coming in with huge track records. And as for Russell Martin, I mean, the only thing, and again, I hate to say this, I told you so. It only takes a cursory glance at whether it's MK Dons, whether it's Swansea, whether it's Southampton, fan forums or social media, whatever, which may not be indicative of the wider support and experience of the fans. But you know, he's now in his fourth club where the fans will say exactly the same thing. And actually, interestingly, he said exactly the same thing in post-match and pre-match press conferences. So, I think you and I have joked in our WhatsApp groups and or individual WhatsApp to each other where maybe at some point, Russell, you are the problem. So I think from that point of view, huge question marks now remain over, and I said this to you last night, Davey, over the fact that are the people who are in charge, and listen, let's make no bones about it. My clear understanding is that Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart are in charge of the day-to-day running of Rangers. And what I mean by that is that the chairman, the deputy chairman are A, living on the other side of the Atlantic, and B, they've very much given, control, delegated authority for these guys to make decisions. Now, do I believe that Russell Martin was sacked without, the rubber stamp of Mr. Cavan and Mr. Marath? No, I don't. Do I think the new appointment will be a rubber stamp without them? No, I don't. But I do believe that the appointment of Russell Martin has been brought to the owners as this is our best candidate, this is our preferred candidate. We've gone through the various loops of due diligence. And if that is the case, and I'll be interested to see in the comments what listeners think, I do not believe that the two men I've mentioned have the track record, and I certainly do not think the fan base have the confidence in them to appoint the successor to Russell Martin. And that raises major issues. And our good friend Andy McGowan has said it many times. We can actually change the manager in many ways as often as we want. And let's have a chat about the difference between a head coach and a manager in due course. But we can do that as often as we want if the structure is there. And I think you made a very valid point last night, Davey, in the Breaking Pod. Everyone, it was really easy to criticise those that have gone before to say, emotionally investment and judgment was clouded because they were living and breathing it and all the various things that were thrown at the previous owners. But if that was all true, and I don't necessarily believe that was the case, but if that it was true, then the current leadership of the club have almost done the exact opposite.
No,
So that
definitely.
we're going to have to end up somewhere in the middle to actually say, and again, Davey, sorry to steal your lines from last night again, but the fan base set the temperature for the club. They set the mood for the club. And there is a significant amount of work to be done in this international window that when we come to Ibrox Saturday week against Dundee United, that A, the place is full, B, that everyone is singing in unity behind whoever is appointed, whether that be a short-term stopgap until someone comes in.
No, I totally agree. And this is the thing about this appointment. That yes, you can't let the fan base make an appointment. No, that's absolutely true. However, what you can do is make sure that you don't pitch someone into a situation that is going to quickly become impossible. And if they come up with Russell Martin 2.0 here, they can't sell that because the fans, as you say, first of all, don't trust them. So they don't have any credit in the bank in the way that somebody who had been successful in the past, if they had then appointed a bad manager and they come out and said, look, we got that wrong, you would go, okay, right, fair enough. Who's your next choice? But these guys don't have that. So they have to be cognizant of that. They've got to be aware of the environment in which this person is going to operate. And with Russell Martin, as we saw, it was going to be incredibly difficult for him unless he started off by just winning. And that was, he told them, well, that won't happen because it takes time. Now, that I think is a kind of pitiful attitude, to be honest, from a manager. I think that's getting an excuse in early for your opening we will. But at Rangers, it just doesn't fly. It just does not fly. People don't care. They don't want to hear it and they don't believe it. Now, you can argue whether that is fair or right or whatever, but what you can't argue is that it exists. So they've got to be aware of that. And I'm like you. I mean, to me, Stuart, I think, going right back to that when he rushed at that banner statement, I just thought you just don't get this club, and I've not seen anything since. And again, I'm sure people would say within the club, well, he's doing a great job, you just don't see it. Fair enough, but the stuff I see, I'm not impressed with. In the case of Thelwell, again, the transfer recruitment business so far has looked poor. It's looked unimaginative. It was unimaginative, but it has looked poor anyway. I mean, it would be fine if they'd all come in and hit the ground running. The manager was a terrible and obviously wrong and flawed at the time. This is not hindsight. Rangers fans said this at the time. And then the laughable, ludicrous decision to hire his son as the head of recruitment, a big important role at Rangers. That's staggering, and I'm staggered he was allowed to. And I don't care if this boy is a genius, by the way, and can spot a player at 100 yards. You can't do that right now. You don't have the credit to do that. And for me, I think that massive red flags.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the challenges we've got here, Davey, is that just because you've worked at Manchester United, just because you've worked at Everton, does not necessarily mean that you're then going to automatically be successful in Scotland. Yep. I think that, with respect, Manchester United are arguably the worst run professional football club at any sort of decent level, never mind the highest level, in the last decade. And I would say, and listen, you're an Evertonian, that I'd say Everton aren't too far behind. So these guys are not coming with weighed down by Premiership medals or Championship medals or really Champions League medals are really sort of clear measures of success. I think that there is unquestionably a naivety in terms of them coming up from south of the border that they think, well, it's only Scotland. I think that there is a concern when you see what they said when Russell Martin was appointed, because either the wool was pulled over their eyes and they were totally hoodwinked by the flashiness of the PowerPoint presentation, or actually, and this is where I am really concerned, is that they actually thought that that type of manager would work. And I think that even those with the Andy McGowans of our pod, who are always the most positive and try to sort of, find the kind of, the pearl amongst the manure, even though that type of fan thought, this is a big risk. And it was a risk which clearly has not paid off at all. So for me, I think particularly Patrick Stewart is, I mean, if I was Patrick Stewart, I would probably just resign and head off into the sunset. I think that Kevin Thelwell in particular, particularly in the recent events in terms of the appointment of son and other things, Yusuf Chermiti and the money handed out for him, there are serious questions mark over that. And I think certainly if anyone thinks, let's just appoint a new manager and everything else will be okay, well, A, that's naive, and B, they will find out in due course that the anger was not just at Russell Martin. I think that's the fairest way to put it.
To go back to the original point, I think that this ties in with that. That what you had were people who came into the club and did not check the environment, did not understand where they were working and what the unique circumstances were. And you mentioned there, any job, you have to do that. Christ, if you're redecorating your house and you're in your room, the first thing you do is look around and say, any hazards in here? Anything I should be aware of? Because that's just common sense. That's what you do. You check your environment and you walk around it. And Rangers singularly failed to do that and have been left, all of them looking incompetent, all of them looking really silly, all of them looking as though they don't know what they're doing. They staked a lot on this guy. He didn't deliver. Then they staked the remaining chips they had on keeping him at least a month too late. And again, not hindsight. Everyone was saying it right after Bruges. The support was pretty united straight away. And yet, I said it on this show 4 weeks ago. You're going to have to sack him. You might as well do it now, while you might be able to claim some credit for being decisive. They didn't. They waited. Results got worse. Performances got worse. And we've ended up exactly where the supporters knew. So no wonder the supporters in future are going to think, I know more about this than you. Because you haven't shown them that in any way that they are wrong on this. They have called things that you've decided, and you've said to them, no, we're right, you're wrong, and you've been proven not to be. And that's where Rangers find ourselves just now. To the game itself then, Davey, I kind of thought we could save some time because I thought we could just copy and paste what we said about the Livy game, but take out the last minute winner, because that was the same. Conceding loads of chances early. coming into it midway through the first half, getting a goal. Second half, coming out looking as though we've had 6 cans of Stella, a cigarette, and a bottle of Valium at half time. Falkirk getting more and more into it, a goal seeming inevitable, a goal coming, then Rangers chucking everything at the opposition goal, although yesterday not even coming close to getting one. It was a derisory performance, and again, I think that one of the things I've been speaking to people about was starts, the way Rangers start, and I think that the consensus is because if you watch them yesterday, Andy McGowan had a good point. He was at the game and he was watching Russell Martin. He moved a player. He was on at a player before kickoff for not standing, for not starting exactly where he was supposed to be. And the players, Man United are the same as this. The players look as though they're so busy going, right, I'm supposed to be here, aren't I? And you're there, aye. And when I get the ball, you're supposed to go over the, I think so anyway. And then I kick it to him and I'm supposed to, and they spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes running about trying to remember what they're supposed to be doing and completely not focusing on the game. And during that time, the other team who are just playing the game in front of them, playing naturally and organically, they then take command of the game. So there was that. And then in terms of the work rate, the commitment of the players, it just was not there. It just was not there. And the old cliche is, well, there's a player still playing for the managers. I couldn't see that yesterday.
Look, I think it's very difficult because fundamental basics of football is that you run hard, you try to get the better of your opponent, whether it's in tennis or whether it's in football or rugby, whatever the case may be. I think a lot of our goals were shaped by not doing the basics, like not tracking back, that probably there was a few players that seemed to just kind of check out, so to speak. I don't think we are as bad as we have looked, which is probably not a particularly great compliment, but I think that any sort of creativity and any sort of just playing what's in front of you seem to be
Out the
just
window.
coached out of them. As team selection, you were never really looking, going, oh yeah, great to see him in, or actually, great to see him being dropped, whatever the case may be. I mean, I think really, and he's not perfect, but I think probably really Jack Butland's been the only player that you'd actually go, well, do you know what? I mean, if it wasn't for Jack Butland, I don't think he would have won any. He would.
No, I mean,
without
the one
exaggerating,
player
maybe
you could
Alloa,
say
but
one player you could say got back to form, unfortunately, and it was practice.
yeah, well, yes, exactly. If you're so busy by the law of averages, you're going to have to make some good saves in amongst it all.
Absolutely.
I think the wider concern about the players is, if you bring someone in, and we'll maybe discuss who comes in next, but I think whoever comes in, if they can kind of get a bit of a G up and get a bit of fight in the guys' bellies, then great. But there's a wider issue around the quality of recruitment. Like the boy Fernandez who came in, who Peterborough fans are sort of saying, bloody hell, did we get that amount for him? He can't even get in the matchday squad. I mean, Yusuf Chermidi has been a huge outlay for a club of our size. I don't even mean in Scotland, I mean in our equivalent leagues in Europe and elsewhere. It's big money, and so far, listen, he needs to be scoring a goal a game for flip's sake to sort of give us a return. So yeah, the jury is out. I think that the wider issue is, if we are having similar conversations about poor performances under another manager, then that would suggest that, there's a cultural issue which is just ingrained and has been allowed to be ingrained in the club over the last few years, which quite simply needs to be broken. And I think that that's why the next appointment is so crucial. And I think that's why there's so much skepticism, particularly around the CEO, who, and make no bones about this, that, Kevin Felwell and Patrick Stewart chose Russell Martin. Now, did Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath have to rubber stamp it? Absolutely. Did they have to rubber stamp his dismissal? Absolutely. But there was always this criticism of, the former owners, they were very emotional because they were Rangers fans and they were very involved, and all the criticism, which I think was needless and unfair, vast majority of the time. Well, if that even was the case for the example of this conversation, then the exact opposite seems to have happened now, where it seems to be that, there's almost, ignoring the noise is fine, to the point of it's just actually ignorance, it's naivety, and I think that it's arrogance. So I think that those in charge are going to have to try to find somewhere in the middle, and ultimately then that will trickle down, because look, anything I've heard about Patrick Stewart has not been complimentary or positive, and that's not just from players and staff and elsewhere. It's just the general view amongst the wider fan base, and I don't even
Mm.
mean with respect those that were targeted with the whole banner statement. I mean just in general, corporates and people who have had any conversations with him. So, yeah, jury's very much out on that, and the wider culture of the club definitely needs to be addressed.
I think that's been the case, throughout this. The players have been really poor, in terms of performance levels. But I also would criticise the work rate and the effort, and I don't give a toss how well they've been doing in training. They haven't replicated it on the part, and also the stuff, as you mentioned, we were told hard running, etc. You haven't seen it. You've seen it against us, and you haven't seen it. The goals we conceded in Graz, for example, I think would shame an amateur team who'd been on the Raz the night before. They were hugely embarrassing. And you can speak about mentality, and there's probably a grain of truth in there. But one, it's a manager's job to build mentality. And two, it wasn't mentality that made us line up a wall or a defensive line at a free kick on the halfway line about 10 yards away from it and leave about 40 yards of space to run into. That's not mentality, that's instruction, that's technique. So I kind of agree with you on the newer players. I think that they are guys who might be better than they've looked. We don't know. I'll see how they get on under a manager who I think is much more functional, and see how he gets on by looking at players at their individual strength and try to piece them together rather than try to jam them all into this, whatever it was he was attempting that just didn't work. And hopefully we will see improvements. Not all of them. Some of them will turn out to be poor. There's no doubt about that. And I think that we will have to, I think we already suspect it, and I think we have to expect it as well, because I think that there's definitely, going to be a few failures in there, but I think there could be a few more successes as well. I think there is ability there that remains untapped, but that's now up to the players themselves to show it. So of course now it turns to the next appointment. We've already spoken about a lack of faith in the people, or a lack of confidence in the people who'll be making the decision to make the right decision. In football, Davey, it's become really, really trendy to say, managers say it after every game, coaches say it all the time, and chairman, and we'll learn from this, right? And I now think it's like just become an absolute throwaway phrase that they just say almost by rote, almost automatic. We'll learn from this. We'll learn from this. Disappointment, then page one of the playbook is say you'll learn from this. And yet they show precious little signs of actually learning from this. And I think that when it comes to the next manager, I'm looking for somebody who is a lot more practical, has a different type of personality to Russell Martin, is not an EFL Championship legend, in terms of, that's their sole record of achievement coming in. The ideal man for me, Neil McCull's to the mass, would be Steven Gerrard. If there was any way to get him back, I would do it. I would explore it. Failing that, someone in the mould of a Sean Dyche, I wouldn't mind. If you're looking in Scotland, I think the two outstanding candidates are McInnes. Whether or not he would come right now is a different matter. Maybe even Stephen Robinson. Muscat's been mentioned a lot. I think that's risky, but it maybe comes with a higher upside in terms of the football that he's renowned for, and he does at least have a track record of winning things. What are your thoughts on some of the early names that have been mentioned? What I don't want, just to be absolutely firm, is I don't want a guy who walks in and says, I have my philosophy and it takes months to get right, because that he's dead in the water from day one.
Big Sam to the end of the season. No, I see Big Sam as.
I think he's happily retired.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I knew you'd asked me that, and I wanted to say, no, no. I see Big Sam, Pardew, and Tony Pulis are now doing some sort of like advert. It's such a poor advert. I don't even know what they're advertising, but I do know the three of them are sun loungers. Look, I mean, I know that Big Sam's last jaunt was trying to keep Leeds in the Premiership, and I know that although he was injured, friend of the pod and lifetime bear Stuart Dallas was telling a few stories about where, in very much clear, colourful terms, he told a few of the European and the South American lads what he thought of them as they were rolling around the floor. And I think there is a level of that. I think we do need a kind of we do need someone who's going to come in here who will grab people by the scruff of the neck. And I'm not saying we need to go back to the days of tipping over physio benches and kicking boots at people, but I just think that like
both from what we can see and from both of us, what we hear from within the club, David, the standards have been allowed to slip. Let's not prolong the what does he wear on the sideline, but look, whoever's appointed next, just wear a suit, shine your brogues, win some football matches, and you're on the right direction.
It's an easy thing. I mean, it's people say it
It's
doesn't
an
matter,
easy
but
win.
it matters to
Jeez,
the
yeah.
fans. And yes, if anyone said, well, if he'd been winning, it wouldn't have mattered. Yes, exactly. But what you do is in a new job, you look round and you say, are there any potential things here that I can steer
Mm-hmm,
clear of
mm-hmm,
that might become an issue?
mm-hmm.
And he didn't do that.
No, and I think that's probably a story for a kind of another pod in terms of when we kind of get down to whoever we appoint and how they should approach it. But I think certainly it needs to be someone who's a clear communicator, who understands the club. The term gets it's a little bit of a sort of cliche, isn't it? But someone who understands how unique Rangers is, someone who has a track record of winning, and obviously, look, the obvious one is, as you said, Davy, is Stephen Gerrard. Can I get on board the Stephen Gerrard train? Absolutely. Um, is it going to be, if he is appointed, the same as before? No, I don't think it is, because we afforded Stephen a lot more patience than a lot of other managers because we understood the magnitude of the task ahead of him. And history will be very kind in terms of how important 55 was for a wide range of reasons. Um, Maybe, and I say this, having kept in contact with him, there's almost part of me doesn't want him to get it simply because I want him always to be held in such high regard history wise, and there's always a danger coming back that that's not the case. Even though I think he would be successful, and I think probably on balance, the kind of guy who jumps out is probably a Sean Dyche, because we need someone who is prepared to be pragmatic, is prepared to look and go, okay, you're good at doing X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to get you to do that, rather than, Amaran sticking, Amad Diallo at right wing back and wondering why he's totally neutered. So it just has to be someone who bluntly comes in and wins some bloody football matches, which I know is such an obvious thing to say, but by hook or by crook, whether it's lumping the centre half up front just to get 3 points, build for the new one. I think, David, you and I, or sorry, me and Adam Thornton were talking about this privately this morning. I said, like, whoever comes in, whether it is a Stephen Robinson, whether it is a whoever, three easy targets for the season, or no, not easy, but reasonable targets. Target number one has to be to win the semi-final against them at Hampden. That's a really, really good start for any new manager. Number two, I think that you have to make Ibrox back into a fortress domestically at least. Therefore, you've got to remain unbeaten the rest of the season. And I don't think that's an unfair expectation. And I think number three, we're 11 points behind now. I think by the split, we need to half that and even be within 5. So mathematically, we're still alive as the clocks change back. We can't continue this. We're developing, we're transitioning, all the buzzwords. Let's just win some football matches. Let's unite the stadium. And I think this is why it's so important that whenever we line out against the situation where we either need to have a new manager in place, or B, that there's a really clear plan. And I think the last thing I'll say, Davey, is Russell Martin could have, right? And I know you're all going to scoff at this. He could have won all 17 games, right? And he could have been in line to take over the next Premiership job, West Ham, before Nuno got it,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
right?
No.
So therefore,
Agreed.
we need to be succession planning for ultimate success or ultimate failure. So unfortunately, it's failure, and it's a context, and we're appointing slightly differently. But it would be a sad, sorry indictment on those in charge of the club if we haven't been having conversations with agents and conversations on the quiet over the last week or two to say, look, if this happens, it's your guy in line, what's he going to do, etc., etc. So I think it's not unfair to say, Davey, flagship this time next week, there should either be an official announcement, or we should be well enough down the line that we know who it is and we're expecting it, the Tuesday, Wednesday of the following week.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Well, at least the next however long it takes, and I would. They have to have someone in before the match against Dundee United on the 18th. Whoever it is, at least the Rangers fans have gone back to arguing with each other about stuff rather than all sitting and going, yep, you're right. Yep, totally agree. That was clearly a one-off based on Russell Martin. Or I hope it's a one-off, because I hope we don't have another manager who makes everyone say the same thing this time. It's a wee bit like a family party at mine that doesn't end in a fight at 2 a.m. after the country and western has gone on. So, yeah, it's very much like that. No, you're totally right. It has to happen. There's just no ifs and buts. They don't have the time. They should, as you say, be ready to go. Whether or not they are, will remain to be seen. But this is not like it came out of the blue. This is not, like this is something that surely, even the most deluded head in the sand, I'm sure he'll turn it around, had to be aware of, might be a possibility. And if they haven't, then those questions of competence that we spoke about earlier will be louder than ever. Right then, folks, that will do us for today here on the flagship show. I'll be back next week, and we'll be here as well if and when a new manager is announced. For day-to-day updates and discussions on everything that's going on, go to our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/heart and hand. And you can also get all those podcasts in audio only on YouTube if they prefer. That's the way you get your content. Go and sign up as a member there. My thanks to our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and my thanks to David Graham.
Pleasure.
It's a bit bloody time we went upwards. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, folks. We'll be back soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.